Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we are going to look at a question that I had, which is posed in the thumbnail, probably in the description of the video, and that is, what if we are totally wrong about the quarterbacks in this draft class? And by that, I don't mean that we are not going to have C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young not go off of the board in the 1 and 2 picks, but I mean, what if, in a sense, maybe we are right about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, and maybe the NFL feels similar enough that they're not willing to go in the top 10, top 15 for these two? How does that shape the draft? What kind of differences will we see? And I will let you kind of decide on that at the end of the video. I think there's two things that I kind of notice different here, but other than that, I don't think it's too interesting, so I will try to make this kind of quick, not going to go over too much about explaining the picks, really just kind of going for some sort of consensus best player available at a position of need type deal, which is typically what teams do anyways, right? There's the setup for the video. If you are coming across my channel for the first time ever, it is the Fantasy Football Forge. Yes, I focus on fantasy most of the year. However, once the calendar changes into the off season, start to look at the class coming into the draft, focus on that here for a while. After the draft, I will go through each of the divisions, at least this is my plan, each of the divisions, and kind of give, I assume, a grade. I don't really love grading drafts, but is there any other way to really look at the draft and say your thoughts? But I'll give my thoughts on each of the teams and how I felt that they did in the draft. Other than that, so as far as subscribing, I of course appreciate it, but if you don't play fantasy football, it may make sense to at least unsubscribe here in like a month. But otherwise, please subscribe, like the video, that's always appreciated. And I think let's just get into this to keep this video pretty quick here. So those are the first two off the board in whatever order, I don't care. Then we are going to have the Cardinals take Will Anderson Jr. as we expect. Also, I did not do trades in this video, in part because I tried doing this thought experiment once, and it was so hard to not take like quarterback here. We have been so programmed to believe that those quarterbacks will be going quite quickly in this draft, that especially when I have trades on, it's like now I want teams to trade up to get them if for instance, Indianapolis weren't to grab a quarterback here. It's just so hard to imagine that they don't. But we're going to go off of the thought process that they don't, and I end up having them go Devin Witherspoon. Maybe I should have had them go Jalen Carter, especially if we're thinking best player available. But the other thought is maybe he slips a little bit, and not far though. Seattle ends up taking Jalen Carter off the board here. Position of need, really good player. You know, there's character concerns, but as far as what's happened up to this point in his life, that seems to be all dealt with, at least. Then after Devin Witherspoon, Jalen Carter, we will have Tyree Wilson coming off the board to the Lions, followed by no quarterback here. We are going to go offensive line is definitely a big need for the Raiders, so we will go what we think might be the top offensive line prospect, especially for the Raiders. It can make sense since interior is as much of a need as anything for their offensive line. Then the Falcons come up to the board and going to give them Nolan Smith. Chicago Bears, nothing creative here. We are going to go with offensive line here at tackle. Paris Johnson Jr. Makes a lot of sense to them. Then the Eagles come up onto the board. And this is where we're definitely not going off of my board. I'm not as big of a fan of Lucas Van Ness as a lot of people are. I totally understand why people are, and his age helps the argument. I just think he's a little bit of a one-note prospect. I think he's a developmental prospect. That's really what it comes down to. He has one trick right now, and that trick on paper didn't really come up with his bench reps. So I have some concerns about will his power transition at the next level. A lot of reasons to believe it will, but also some reasons to think not. And I would think that some teams will also be concerned about that. But ultimately for the Eagles, he does make sense. They don't need immediate help. So as far as getting a developmental guy, that makes sense in the mold of like a Rashawn Gary being drafted up this high. And then also, he's the prototype that they like to get on their line, somebody who can push the pocket back. Then the Titans come up onto the board, and I have them taking the next edge off of the board. I'm going to go with Myles Murphy here. They need help on the offensive line, defensive line. Offensive line, I think, just a little bit deeper than edge even, just as far as once you get past that second or third tier, depending on exactly how you have them broken up. And so they're going to get edge and worry about offensive line later. Then Houston comes up onto the board, and maybe they could go Christian Gonzalez, but they really don't have that as one of their top needs for cornerback. They need help on the defensive line. And with, I believe, that's kind of the first consensus tier of edges off of the board, then we are going to go for, we're going to give them Bryan Bresee. I think he goes before Kalijah Kancey ultimately here, and gives them a little, well, both of them could give them some juice. So interior defensive line for Houston, think of it however you want. I like Bryan Bresee there. Then the Jets come up onto the board, and nothing creative here. I think you need to make sure that Aaron Rodgers can stand tall in that pocket, not get hit too much. And Anton Harrison, I think, is your best bet for that. He's not the highest ceiling prospect out of the offensive line prospects that are still available at this point, but he is the best immediate pass blocking guy. Then the New England Patriots, nothing creative here compared to my mock draft 1.0, Christian Gonzalez going to New England. If he's available there, I think they're going to have a hard time passing up on him, get a lockdown quarterback, which they need. Then the Packers come up onto the board, and I'm going to have them go Jaxon Smith-Njigba here. He very well may not be on their draft board. The one reason that I would like him over Quentin Johnston is that he offers a security blanket of a sort for a guy like Jordan Love, which would make a lot of sense as a need. So that's where I'm going in this draft. Then as for Washington comes up into the board, and finally the value is there according to the NFL, and Anthony Richardson comes off of the board here. Pittsburgh. And nothing too creative here. I think that they absolutely need to make sure that their quarterback has a good pocket to work with. Priority numero uno for them. Then the Lions come up onto the board, and they are going to just strengthen the back side of that defense a little bit more with him and Kirby Joseph. Would be a great duo. With how the board has fallen so far, they're going to address that instead of adding to those trenches a little bit more and making that more intimidating. Then we are going to have our other quarterback finally come off the board here to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay fans, Washington fans, how would you like this if it were to happen? Do you not like it? Be interested to find out. Then Joey Porter going to Seattle could use some help there at cornerback. I don't think that it's a good time to be going interior offensive line. Some of this talent is just a step ahead of those guys. Then Quentin Johnston still available here for the Chargers. Is that a good fit? I'm not 100% sure, and I think that would depend on the person that you ask. In this case, they're going to go for it just based on a consensus wide receiver board. In general, he's a top 3 pretty much for everyone. Then Baltimore we have coming up on the board, and they need help here at cornerback. So I'm going to give them Deonte Banks, finish off the cornerbacks tier of them. Then we still have some wide receivers here that could go and help out for Minnesota, so they're going to do that. And Jacksonville comes up onto the board. No major needs still. They could go interior offensive line at this point, but not the biggest concern in the world. Let's just help out that offense, and we are going to go tight end here with Dalton Kincaid. Oh, he was up on the board. I missed him. Dalton Kincaid going to Jacksonville. I think that could make some good sense for them, make them a little bit more dangerous. Then the New York Giants will take the other wide receiver that could go in the first round in Jordan Addison. And that brings Dallas up onto the board. And, Dallas likes to take these big named players in the draft, and they're going to get another one here with Bijan Robinson. Sorry, Tony Pollard, going to be in a split backfield again here. Then Buffalo comes up onto the board. They need some help at the right tackle, if anything. Dwan Jones is one of the just guaranteed right tackles. He's not really a left tackle prospect, so it's a nice fit there, and he's best player available at a position of need. So works well for Buffalo there. Maybe not their biggest need, but an important need nonetheless. Then we are going to go back to the tight end class. So here, this is my bias coming in maybe a little bit, but I'm going to go Darnell Washington to Cincinnati. Now, I would really think it would be fun for Cincinnati. If they got Darnell Washington in this draft, I would prefer him go to my Packers, but that doesn't happen. Cincinnati, Darnell Washington would be able to help them on that offensive line a little bit while adding a bit of a weapon. And then if later in the draft they went Zach Kuntz as a very big receiving threat, you get your big blocker, your big receiver there at tight end. That could be super exciting, I think, for the Bengals. Then New Orleans comes in. They just need help along the front of their line. I would go Mozzie Smith here, but consensus board, they're going to go Kalijah Kancey, bring some pop into that front line for them. Then the Eagles are coming up onto the board, and they have no immediate needs, so they are just going to go essentially best player available. That's definitely at a thin position here in O'Cyrus Torrence, and just secure things up potentially in the short term, but definitely for the future. On that offensive line, good matchup for them. Then Kansas City's going to finish this up, going back to the edge and starting off the next tier at edge. So for me, I don't think that, at least with how this draft goes, there's any huge impacts by having those quarterbacks fall. If there was, trading was allowed, you would think that maybe at some point here, Tampa, Washington would start to get anxious and try to trade up. Very possible. Also think that opens up the door for a little bit more trading here between picks like 4 through 8 at least, for teams who want to come up and get some guys. I don't like Christian Gonzalez would be a name that probably a team might find worth trading up for. I don't know how many names there are really worth trading up for at that point in the draft. If Jalen Carter's off of the board, if they're concerned about the that front edge class. I have a little bit of a deeper edge class on my board, but if they are concerned about them all going off by like pick 11, you could always see a bit of a piranha fight for them. There's just players here and there that maybe teams weren't expecting to see. Namely, I think like Quentin Johnston at least somewhat falls here for the Chargers to be able to take if they wanted to. I would say Brian Branch falls, but he has a wide range of possibilities that he could go in. So I don't know. I didn't think it really impacted the overall draft too much when not including trades. Ultimately, I just thought it would be fun to look at if those quarterbacks fell. Would you be excited, Washington? Would you be excited, Tampa Bay? How defeated would you be, Indianapolis? Are you thinking, okay, well, I guess they're just planning on going for a quarterback next year? Some really good prospects there that you may not have to wait 3 years to find out what you got. Let me know. Hope you enjoyed this. Hey there, this is Editing Steve. I just finished editing the video, and I felt like we did not have enough chaos to ensure that the title and the thumbnail weren't clickbait. So another idea came to my mind. I decided to play it out with the quarterbacks, and I will just put this up on the screen. You can already see it. At pick number 1 for Carolina, I have them actually going Bryce Young, and then that sets off a train of events. So I don't have too many trades in this draft. I tried to stick to the same just to kind of see how this might impact things. And at that point, I have Houston saying, you know what, we're willing to trade out of this spot at this point. We wanted Bryce Young. He was our guy. For whatever reason, we feel safe enough to go back a little ways and still hopefully get our target, or maybe we have a couple of targets that we feel pretty equal about. And in the end, I have the Lions, this new chaos erupts, and the Lions are in a really, really good spot, draft capital-wise, to make this trade happen with Houston. And so I end up having Detroit trade their 6th and 18th pick up in order to ensure that they get Jalen Carter. Maybe they decide they don't want to risk not getting him with all of a sudden this board getting shaken up compared to expectations coming in. At that point, Arizona goes Will Anderson. Once again, I really thought about having him trade out of here. Could create chaos for sure. A lot of potential, but didn't want to get too crazy here. Just kind of made this for fun. So Will Anderson followed by Anthony Richardson, still going to Indianapolis. In the end, they just decide that Anthony Richardson, being the traits guy that he is, matches what they want. They want that ceiling. They're going for it all compared to CJ Stroud. It's a little bit more of a safe pick. Definitely more of a safe pick, but just not the pick that they want to go for in this draft at the end of the day. And then Seattle, Tyree Wilson. Then Houston still gets CJ Stroud here at pick 6. In this case, who knows? Maybe teams would trade up ahead of them. That might be way too risky of a move, but it's quarterback chaos. A couple different picks decided to go here in this draft, especially as it starts to shake things up. Then we have a couple of cornerbacks going off of the board back to back here to the Las Vegas, the Falcons. Then Chicago goes Peter Skoronski over Paris Johnson at the end of the day here. Lucas Van Ness still. Then Paris Johnson ends up going to the Tennessee Titans, so they're happy to get a good tackle here. And then Houston takes Joey Porter Jr. here with, one of their 3 picks here in the first round. Then Anton Harrison still have going to the Jets. Broderick Jones end up going to New England because their cornerback is not here anymore. But Broderick Jones, solid tackle. They need help on that offensive line yet. Green Bay ends up going Nolan Smith. Just wanted to test out if they it would be a bit of a surprise if they do end up going wide receiver, and I've done that in my other 2 drafts so far that are out. So Nolan Smith to Green Bay basically just become Georgia North. I know we're not the only team. I've got a lot of players on a lot of teams as of late, especially on defense. That would be very us to take a first-round pick from Georgia 3 years in a row here. Well, 4 players in 3 years in a row. Then Will Levis to Washington in this event. Deonte Banks to Pittsburgh as the tackles have been dwindled down a little bit more in this scenario, so they do go cornerback. Miles Murphy to Houston, help get a little bit of added defensive help. Definitely could go wide receiver. I just think that Jackson Smith-Jigba is a little more similar to John Mechie that they have coming back. They would fill a lot of the same roles, not exactly, of course. They're each their own players, so that could be possible. Quentin Johnson could also be possible, or any of the other receivers. Then Buccaneers, Brian Brzee, addressing a different need in this case, followed by Kalijah Cansey to Seattle. Dalton Kincaid to the Chargers, obviously could have gone wide receiver here again. Just going a different avenue to see how that shakes things up. Quentin Johnson to the Ravens. Finally get at least a bigger target, even if he doesn't quite play like it for, we don't know who for. Then Jackson Smith-Jigba going to the Vikings there. Brian Branch to Jacksonville. I think they'd be very happy in this scenario. Zay Flowers to New York. Maybe they'd prefer Jordan Addison over Zay. I think it would be a better match, personally, but maybe they would prefer Zay. I know they've just had a top 30 meeting with him or whatever. Let's see, Bijan Robinson, Juwan Jones, those are the same. Michael Mayer going to the Bengals, just went a different route for tight end there for them. Mozzie Smith, Jordan Addison, then to the Eagles in this case. Kind of ran out of some of the other positions that they might want to go for, and best player available felt like Jordan Addison at that point. And then Josh Jones to Kansas City. I think he would be a great fit for them, so that would be interesting. Just wanted to do this little draft here for fun and more quarterback chaos. So hope you enjoyed it. A little icing on the cake. Bye-bye.